Her concerns persisted because I seldom explored how her affair truly affected me with anyone else besides her. She worries I might harbor suppressed animosity, but I don't. It's like touching a hot stove. Once burned, you're cautious. I'm not emotionless, but I guard some feelings within. I discussed this with my wife, whom I'll call Jenny. She not only approved but encouraged me to provide more detail than planned. Jenny believed it was necessary for others to understand why she pursued reconciliation so fervently, why it succeeded, and why I resisted and now perceive our marriage differently. Upon reviewing the initial draft, I felt uneasy about how Jenny was portrayed in the story and subsequently in our marriage. Though she was fine with it, I felt compelled to address it up front. Jenny has transformed into an extraordinary partner, mother, and individual. She holds a respected professional position and endured significant suffering partly due to her actions and my own. Throughout reconciliation, she underwent a profound change and emerged stronger. While her betrayal was devastating, circumstances allowed me to forgive her, not condone her actions. I lost part of myself in the process, while she emerged as a better person. Though I sometimes resent this, I recognize the positive impact she's had on my life over the past 23 years. Presenting this chronologically, I wasn't aware of some events until later, drawing details from Jenny's therapeutic writings. We still have those notebooks, planning to burn them on our 50th wedding anniversary. We married at 20, and about a year later, I returned to school part-time to complete my degree. Eventually, we had a child, and I felt the pressure to finish my studies as my son turned 2. As I embarked on my final year of college in September 1993, I found myself juggling a hectic schedule, working part-time as a store stocker from the early hours of 3 a.m. to 7 a.m., followed by a full-time administrative job at the police department from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I barely had a moment to spare. On top of that, I attended evening classes on Tuesdays and weekend sessions on Saturdays. Meanwhile, my wife maintained her own demanding schedule as a nurse's aide at a local hospital. Despite our busy lives, tensions brewed between us in the weeks leading up to the incident. It was the spring of 1994, and I was gearing up for finals week. My academic responsibilities weighed heavily on me, as success meant the culmination of months of hard work and sacrifice. However, my wife grew increasingly resentful of my dedication to my studies, longing for more quality time together. The breaking point came on a Monday evening, as I sat poring over a research paper due the following day. Frustrations reached a crescendo, and in a moment of exasperation, I implored my wife to cease her incessant complaints and childish behavior. It was then that she dropped a bombshell. I hate you, and I am in love with someone else. Stunned and disbelieving, we engaged in a heated argument, during which she confessed to an emotional affair with a janitor at her workplace. What began as innocent camaraderie had blossomed into clandestine meetings and shared grievances about our relationship. The revelation left me reeling, questioning the foundation of our marriage and the trust I had placed in my wife. As the echoes of her confession reverberated in the silent chambers of my mind, I felt a seismic shift within me, as if the very fabric of my reality had been torn asunder. The revelation of her infidelity was a heavy blow, one that left me reeling in disbelief and grappling with a torrent of conflicting emotions. In the wake of her admission, I found myself adrift in a sea of uncertainty, my thoughts consumed by a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and profound sadness. The foundation of trust upon which our relationship had been built lay shattered, leaving me to confront the harsh truth of her deception. As I struggled to make sense of the chaos raging within me, I couldn't help but question the authenticity of our shared history. Had our love been nothing more than an illusion, a mirage shimmering in the desert of my naivety? The memories we had woven together now seemed tainted by the specter of her betrayal, casting a shadow over the once bright tapestry of our relationship. In the depths of my despair, I grappled with a profound sense of loss, mourning not only the death of our relationship but also the shattered dreams and promises that had once bound us together. The future we had envisioned lay in ruins, its once promising landscape now obscured by the wreckage of her infidelity. And yet, amidst the wreckage of my broken heart, a flicker of resilience began to take root. Though her betrayal had left me wounded and scarred, it could not extinguish the flame of hope that burned within me. With each passing day, I vowed to reclaim my sense of self-worth and rebuild my life from the ashes of my shattered dreams. In the crucible of her betrayal, I discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, a resilience born of adversity and tempered by the fires of adversity. Though the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, I refused to be defined by her betrayal. Instead, I would emerge from the crucible of my pain stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. In the wake of our confrontation, I embarked on a series of decisive actions aimed at safeguarding my well-being and securing our assets. This entailed taking proactive measures such as changing the locks on our home and closing our joint bank accounts. With meticulous attention to detail, I divided the funds, ensuring that my wife received her share, which I entrusted to her sister with clear instructions regarding further communication. Turning to my family for support during this challenging time, I arranged for my sister and younger sibling to assist in caring for my son as I navigated the demands of work and school. Upon returning home, I devoted myself to the task of changing the locks and fortifying the security of our residence, determined to create a safe haven for myself and my child amidst the turmoil. As the day unfolded, I found myself grappling with a myriad of conflicting emotions, from anger and betrayal to sadness and disbelief. Meanwhile, my wife, unable to confront the consequences of our confrontation, sought solace in the company of the janitor from her workplace, finding refuge in his understanding and empathy. Yielding to his invitation, she retreated to his home that evening, seeking temporary respite from the turmoil of our shattered marriage. In the aftermath of her encounter, she confided in me, recounting the events of the night with a mixture of remorse and regret. Initially swept up in the excitement of the moment, she soon found herself overwhelmed by guilt and shame as memories of our past intimacy resurfaced, casting a shadow over her newfound connection. Struggling to reconcile her actions with her sense of self, she grappled with feelings of self-doubt and confusion, unable to escape the repercussions of her betrayal. 2 days later, I found myself still entangled in the web of blaming him for the sequence of events that had transpired. The day unfolded with its usual rhythm: work, home, shower, breakfast shared with my son and sister. Amidst this semblance of normalcy, my wife's call pierced through, dripping with an undertone of arrogance and malice. Despite her hostile demeanor, I reluctantly agreed to meet her on Sunday at 1 p.m. to facilitate her spending time with our son at a nearby park. However, her demands escalated beyond reason. She insisted on taking him for the entire weekend, a request I vehemently denied. Recognizing that having him under our roof resolved the immediate childcare predicament, she reluctantly relented, though not without slamming the phone down with audible force. Upon reaching work, I wasted no time in initiating divorce proceedings. Later, a colleague from the clerk's office notified me of the readiness of the paperwork for service. Promptly, I reached out to a deputy, elaborating on the situation and urging him to serve her at her workplace, a favor he agreed to fulfill the following day. Meanwhile, my wife returned to her workplace, where the flirtatious advances of the janitor served as unwelcome distractions. Despite his claims of being a divorced father of 3, their planned lunch and evening rendezvous fell through, leaving her in a state of disappointment. Throughout the night, she made repeated attempts to reach me, only to be met with abrupt hang-ups owing to the lack of caller identification. The following day, as I awaited news of the service, anxiety gnawed at me relentlessly, manifesting in numerous trips to the restroom and bouts of nausea. Yet, amidst the turmoil, I remained steadfast in my conviction that pursuing the divorce was the righteous course of action. Around 11 a.m., my wife rendezvoused with the janitor for lunch, their liaison shrouded in secrecy yet palpable in its intensity as they sought solace within the confines of his car before returning to the cafeteria. At noon, back at her workplace, she was confronted by the deputy, her facade of normalcy crumbling as he served her with the divorce papers, citing her infidelity as grounds for the dissolution of our marriage. Reflecting on the moment later, she recounted a profound wave of shame and guilt enveloping her as the stark reality of her actions crashed down upon her with unrelenting force, leaving her in a state of utter desolation. I found myself at a point of no return, realizing the irreversible damage inflicted upon my marriage as I proceeded with the divorce. Despite the gravity of the situation, a small part of me held onto the naive hope that he might relent, foolishly convincing myself it was just another trivial argument. Looking back, such thoughts now seem twisted. I vividly recall the deputy gently guiding me into a chair amidst my anguished outcries. The head nurse attempted to quell my escalating distress, while amidst the chaos, my affair partner reached out for my hand, only to receive an unintended blow as I lashed out in emotional turmoil. The force of my accusation that he had ruined my life reverberated through the room. Eventually, they managed to calm me down. The deputy then informed me of the janitor's departure, allowing me to regain composure and continue my duties. However, a fellow nurse provided crucial support, shielding me from further scrutiny. Hours later, as my shift drew to a close, I was summoned to the hospital administrator's office, a knot of apprehension forming in my stomach as I suspected repercussions for my earlier outburst. The news of my termination, delivered swiftly and decisively, left me stunned. Instructed not to return to the premises, I was left to grapple with the sudden loss of employment and the uncertainty that lay ahead. It became apparent that someone had witnessed the altercation in the parking lot, setting off a chain of events that ultimately led to the janitor's dismissal. As word of the divorce papers spread throughout the hospital, the janitor faced questioning, termination, and a swift escort off the premises. Within hours, the entire hospital became privy to the unfolding drama. Meanwhile, I retreated to the solace of my parents' home, sparing them the full extent of the turmoil brewing in my personal life. That evening, as I shared dinner with my son, a sense of relief washed over me, knowing that the consequences had been meted out, albeit through a stroke of luck. Despite the precariousness of the situation, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of surprise that I had not faced legal repercussions for my impulsive actions. However, as the knock on the door shattered the tranquility of our evening, I was confronted with yet another unexpected turn of events. Standing before me was a woman, visibly pregnant and barely able to maintain her composure, inquiring about Jenny's whereabouts. With a heavy heart, I confirmed her absence, signaling the finality of the chapter that had come to define my life. I found myself standing there, soon to be her ex-husband, delivering the news of the served divorce papers earlier that day. She introduced herself as Wendy, the janitor's wife, bearing their fourth child. Despite my initial reluctance, I allowed her inside to take a seat. Wendy proceeded to unravel the unsettling events leading to the termination, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Who had I married? She also unveiled disturbing details about the rendezvous house, where my wife and the janitor had their secret liaisons. In that moment, I wished I could erase him from existence, not just for my wife's sake, but for the dignity of humanity. This guy was beyond contempt. I'll delve more into the house situation later. After assuring me of her intention to solely speak to Jenny and unveil the truth, Wendy departed an hour later. She then sought out my father-in-law, under the impression she was Jenny's friend. When Jenny emerged, Wendy revealed her true identity and the chilling truth about the janitor. Wendy and the janitor were still legally bound, and she was 8 months along with their fourth child. Jenny was visibly distraught, her tears flowing freely as she sought forgiveness. However, the revelation took a darker turn. The janitor, along with another hospital colleague and a friend, were embroiled in a twisted game, scoring points for seducing married women within 90 days. My wife was his third conquest. Oh, and on the night he claimed to be with one of his kids, he was entangled with a fourth woman. According to Wendy, this fourth woman had been married for a staggering 25 years. Wendy was in the process of informing her husband. Then it was our neighbor's turn. The house doubled as a clandestine venue for these illicit rendezvous with married women. Wendy learned about this just 2 hours after his termination. He returned home, inebriated and tearful, bearing his soul in a futile attempt to reconcile. Wendy left with the kids, informing my wife that she made her decision clear, squaring up her shoulders before delivering a hard slap across my wife's face, branding her a foolish cow. Jenny stood there in shock as Wendy unleashed her tirade, accusing her of shamefully discarding her family. Wendy recounted witnessing a devoted father, alone with his son, painting a picture of a husband let down by his wife's selfishness and lack of morals. Overwhelmed, my wife lost control, breaking down in tears as Wendy walked away, got into her car, and drove off. My in-laws checked on her once the car was out of sight, finding her essentially catatonic. They managed to get her inside, considering taking her to the emergency room as she began speaking incoherently. My father-in-law suspected she might be on speed. Despite her remorse and determination to fix things, it took a while for them to calm her down and piece together the whole story. My father-in-law, a good man, was deeply hurt, his face reflecting shame and disappointment. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, true to form, placed the blame squarely on me. In the aftermath, my father-in-law reached out the next day, apologizing, tears almost visible in his eyes as he recounted Jenny's isolated state, confined to her room all day and night. I informed him about our scheduled meeting at the park on Sunday at 1 p.m., to which he simply said okay before hanging up. I spent Friday working and Saturday attending school, relieved to learn by day's end that I had passed and would soon receive my degree. It was bittersweet, but a significant milestone nonetheless. That night, my parents celebrated with extended family, hosting a cookout. I felt grateful for my supportive family. The next day, Jenny's absence was noticeable, but no one broached the subject. By then, I still hadn't heard from her. Our planned meeting at 1 p.m. came and went without a word from her. At 3:30 p.m., her father called, expressing concern about Jenny's disoriented state, pacing around in her bathrobe with a notebook in hand, neglecting basic self-care. He was exhausted and afraid she might harm herself if left alone. He urged me to come see her, but I couldn't summon any feelings for her. I advised him to seek help for her and assured him she could see our son once she had pulled herself together. That first night, I felt nothing for her. I had endured my trial by fire and emerged stronger, but more on that later. I made a firm decision not to invest any more emotional energy into this individual. For 2 weeks, there was no communication from her or her family. It had been 2 weeks since my last conversation with my father-in-law. During this time, I resigned from my part-time job and actively pursued a new opportunity. While I had plans to pursue my Master of Business Administration, I felt it was prudent to settle into a new job for a year or two. Meanwhile, my son began asking about his mother, and I could only offer him reassurance. The longer she remained absent, the better it seemed for my chances of securing a favorable custody arrangement. One day, while at the PD, she called, expressing a desire to arrange a meeting to see our son. I questioned whether she had composed herself enough not to distress him, to which she assured me she had. I agreed to meet her at the park on Saturday at 9 a.m., insisting that she bring her father along. I was not willing to meet her alone. Accompanied by my mother, I met her at the park and felt validated in my decision to limit her visit to just 2 hours. She appeared disheveled, having lost a significant amount of weight, with no makeup and lacking the familiar feminine sense I associated with her. Later, I learned that her mother had bathed and dressed her. Jenny was still not fully functional. These park meetings continued for approximately 3 weeks, gradually extending to 4 hours, including Sundays. While there was a semblance of improvement each week, I remained concerned about her mental well-being. As a result, I refrained from allowing our son to stay with her overnight or be alone with her. Eventually, my mother-in-law grew impatient with this arrangement and decided to take legal action for custody. At this juncture, Jenny had yet to sign the divorce papers, but I was content with that decision, as I found myself faced with the option to file for divorce after 6 months. Yet it was the custody lawsuit that ignited a deep-seated anger within me. Despite my prior openness, communicated through discussions with her father to work towards a shared custody arrangement, she opted for full custody. In response, I counter-petitioned for full custody, citing her mental incapacity as grounds. I steeled myself for a protracted legal battle. This was to be my channel for the pent-up rage I harbored. As the day of the custody hearing dawned, my lawyer brought to my attention a request from her attorney. Jenny sought a private conversation with me. Initially wary, I relented, agreeing to a discussion in the hallway, visible to both legal teams but with muted conversations. During this exchange, Jenny engaged in mundane chatter, inquiring about our son's well-being and my academic pursuits. I disclosed my recent academic success, which seemed to momentarily lift her spirits. However, when she requested attendance at my upcoming graduation, I rebuffed her, emphasizing its intimate nature, reserved for close family and friends, a sharp rejection that visibly wounded her. This action was fueled by my desire to inflict pain, a manifestation of my simmering resentment towards her. Tearfully, She retreated to her attorney's side, and the hearing resumed. Throughout my testimony, I divulged no startling revelations. However, my mother-in-law took center stage, casting blame upon me, accusing me of infidelity, a baseless claim she asserted had driven my wife to a state of mental instability. Despite the lack of evidence, truth took a backseat to her fervent accusations. Moreover, she alleged an incident of assault, claiming I had forcefully propelled my wife onto the hood of a car on the night she departed, an accusation as unfounded as it was inflammatory. Then came Jenny's moment to speak. Interrupting her lawyer's questioning, she sought permission from the judge to address the court. Though advised to consult with her attorney first, she proceeded without hesitation. Her words, transcribed from her notebook, resonated with a poignant blend of sorrow and determination. I recall feeling a profound sense of sorrow as the hearing commenced. Listening to Op present his narrative, detailing his diligent care of our son during these trying weeks, I felt an urgency to rectify the situation. My mother's attempts to shield me with lies became unbearable. I reached my breaking point. Something needed to change. Jenny expressed a heartfelt desire to extend apologies to both sets of parents, acknowledging the rift that had likely formed between us. Despite the palpable tension, she assumed full responsibility, hoping to salvage the fragments of our fractured relationship. In a courageous gesture, she announced her decision to rescind her custody claim, deferring instead to any custodial arrangements I deemed suitable. After consulting with my attorney, we proposed supervised 1-hour visits for 6 weeks, gradually transitioning to our son staying with her every other weekend thereafter, pending no issues. Looking back, I saw a glimmer of possibility during this time, a chance for us to be civil, if not reconciled. The schedule worked smoothly, and by the 3rd week, we began spending visitation time with just her, me, and our son, often extending to 3 or 4 hours. Though I maintained a reserved demeanor, I found genuine enjoyment in watching my son interact with his mother, recognizing the benefit to them both. However, during the 5th visit, an incident occurred when she unexpectedly hugged my right arm from behind while I was watching our son play. Startled, I reacted harshly, yelling at her never to touch me again. Remarkably, the following week, we resumed our interactions as if nothing had happened, and she kept her distance. Another month passed, and our conversations increasingly focused on day-to-day matters. I secured a new job with a higher salary, while she embarked on nursing school. She confided in me about the janitor's persistent calls, despite her efforts to dissuade him. Indifferent to her romantic entanglements, I expressed my apathy towards her personal affairs, focusing solely on our co-parenting arrangement. 6 months after our separation, I broached the subject of her signing the divorce papers, to which she initially refused. Reminding her that her signature was merely procedural, she proposed a meeting at our house that night for a discussion. If I still desired a divorce, she agreed to sign the papers. I consented, and she arrived with small black composition notebooks, explaining that she had begun jotting down her thoughts the day after receiving the divorce papers. Unsure of her motivation, she found solace in documenting every detail of the events. Despite my reluctance, she insisted on sharing her writings with me, cautioning that it would be emotionally challenging but feeling compelled to help me understand her perspective. She made an effort to salvage our marriage, and despite my initial reluctance, I delved into her writings. It proved to be quite a challenging experience, especially as the details regarding our intimacy were not explicitly stated but rather hinted at in general terms. Yet, what struck me the most were her reflections on me and our relationship, which she shared with the janitor. Through her writings, she chronicled her mental breakdown, initially presenting her thoughts in a disorganized manner that gradually improved over time as she began to introspect her actions as a form of therapy. One particular passage caught my attention, where she arrived at a seemingly rational conclusion, believing it would resolve everything. She recounted her experiences with the janitor, noting that she never reached a climax with him. In her mind, this absence of pleasure absolved her of any wrongdoing and led her to expect me to take her back. However, her father's uncomfortable clarification shattered this belief, revealing the flaws in her logic. Reading her writings didn't alter my decision, but it did evoke a sense of fear within me. It became apparent how fragile her mental state had become during those 2 weeks. Despite my initial hesitations, I agreed to give it more time, which encouraged her to suggest that I write to her as well. She believed this exchange would provide her with insight into how to support me better. Acknowledging my own emotional turmoil, I saw potential in this approach as a means to move forward and possibly rebuild a healthier relationship in the future. What began as her personal therapy through writing gradually evolved into scheduled meetings twice a week. During these meetings, we documented our perceptions of our relationship before the pivotal day. We exchanged letters, made notes, and posed questions in writing, all guided by the simple rule of honesty and respectful communication. We embarked on an exploration of our pre-D-Day marriage, navigating through each subsequent day until reaching Sunday. I had a conversation with her parents after she received the divorce papers, and we agreed to reassess and proceed accordingly. I must admit, during this period, my behavior was terrible. While I answered questions honestly, there was one exception, which I'll address later. I used the opportunity to humiliate her, making her repeatedly recount the negative things she said to the janitor about me. I compelled her to provide excruciating details about their intimate encounters, which, despite being relatively mundane compared to our previous experiences together, were genuinely hurtful. Initially, I believed I could handle it, as I had no interest in reconciliation. However, hearing those details proved to be tough. Looking back, it's astonishing how cruel I had become, but at the time, it felt justified. After about a month of this process, I had to acknowledge that it helped me to some extent. She proposed moving back in and taking the next step, but I refused, despite her pleading and compelling arguments. I stood my ground, explaining that even if I entertained the idea of reconciliation, I couldn't be intimate with her again. She accepted this condition, suggesting that I could explore outside the marriage while she remained faithful. However, that wasn't consistent with my character, so I declined. After another month, I relented but imposed strict rules. These rules were non-negotiable and firmly established. Firstly, she had to sleep in the spare room. Secondly, absolutely no physical contact was allowed. Thirdly, she could keep her money in her checking account, but I managed her banking and provided checks for her bills, rent for the room, expenses, and spending money. This was due to her giving the janitor $300 from our savings account a week before D-Day. Moreover, I anticipated that she might decline to move in. Fourthly, her mother was not permitted to enter my home until we decided to reconcile, as I was still upset with her. Fifthly, all prior custody agreements would automatically be reinstated if reconciliation didn't happen. Sixthly, if I found someone else, she had 1 week to move out. She agreed to these terms and moved in. It proved to be more challenging than I anticipated, as I no longer had the cooling down period between the times I saw her. She was there all the time, leading to frequent small fights and hurtful remarks from me. I wanted her out. Shortly after she moved back in, we initiated Thursday night fight night, a concept stemming from our writing sessions every Thursday night after the kid was asleep. We established a routine of addressing issues before bedtime, a practice that continues today in a modified form. Despite my difficulty, I persistently brought up her affair, but she handled it with composure. I acknowledged my emotional cruelty, yet she remained resilient, believing we were meant to be together. Committed to rebuilding our lives independently, she gave me the time I needed. 6 months after she moved back in, I had my breakthrough. After a challenging day, I locked myself in the bedroom, unable to bear it any longer. My wife patiently waited outside the door until nearly midnight when I finally opened it. We went to her room, where I revealed my struggles after she left on the night I discovered the affair. I admitted to concealing certain details during our recovery. For the first time, I allowed her to hug and kiss me on the forehead, marking the initial emotional connection. Reflecting on this journey, I realized how crucial her patience and understanding were. Each step brought us closer, showing me the depth of her commitment and the strength of our bond. From the darkest moments emerged a glimmer of hope, a sign that perhaps, despite the pain and turmoil, there was still a chance for redemption and reconciliation. As we navigated through the complexities of rebuilding trust and healing wounds, I found solace in her unwavering support and the resilience of our love, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of the human spirit. I allowed her to be close to me, though my forgiveness was not genuine until several months later. Nevertheless, uttering the words began to open the door for me. Gradually, physical touch increased, holding hands, farewell kisses, hugs, and so forth. These interactions became more commonplace in our relationship. While full togetherness did not occur, we were progressing in that direction. Almost a year after her return, we became close. This period seemed like our hysterical bonding phase. She continued journaling, and according to her, we were close 32 times in 28 days. Years later, she revealed that until the night we became close, she woke up every morning thinking it might be our last day together. She kept telling herself to endure just one more day. Recognizing these signs, she understood that I was reestablishing a connection. Today, we enjoy a strong marriage, both successful in our careers, with 3 grown children. As far as we know, they are unaware of these past events. There are no plans to disclose, but we won't lie if they inquire. Both of us underwent significant changes. My wife emerged stronger and wiser, viewing this period as an unnecessary evil she caused but successfully overcame. Sometimes, I believe she still imposes punishment on herself. As for me, this topic seldom surfaces in our discussions or arguments. Not for over 20 years. She is perceptive and often recognizes when I experience a trigger, though infrequent, they still occur perhaps once or twice a year. While brief, they sting. Typically, she grabs my hand and holds it or hugs me, saying I love you or simply expressing gratitude. I lost some positive aspects of myself. I tend to withhold my feelings, dealing with them privately while supporting her emotional needs. I've made it clear that I won't be her emotional crutch anymore. It is now her responsibility to communicate the issue and propose a plan for resolution, which I will assist in implementing. I love her, and I had to learn to love her again. It's different, more realistic, but intense nonetheless. As mentioned earlier, I believe I had to sacrifice a part of my kindness for her to grow into a better person. At this juncture in my life, I am content with that choice. I share this hoping it may benefit someone. While every situation is unique, this approach proved effective for us, and I am grateful. I'm not pushing for reconciliation. I'm advocating for self-control. Focus on what you can change, not what you can't. Prioritize what benefits you in your specific circumstances. Be self-centered to some extent, then consider rebuilding a collective we in a marriage or relationship later. Look up the Serenity Prayer on Google. In my opinion, no truer words have been written. Remember, you're hearing about our worst days during the process of surviving infidelity. Despite this tragedy, we've created many greater, happier memories. I wish you all the best on this journey. With effort focused on yourself, you can emerge victorious on the other side of the pain. We are still married. Now we have grandchildren, and if you're aware, you know it's a different kind of love. My wife is semi-retired, working as PRN, meaning as needed or when she wants to. I continue working full-time, but we find time for travel. I can't recall the last time I had a trigger, perhaps about 3 years ago, and only because our oldest discovered about my wife's affair through a vindictive relative. Leading a very lonely life, my wife handled it with grace and humility, and it impacted me. I finally moved on completely. She apologized for the pain she caused, and we both emphasized it was in the past. Any issues he had, we offered help but cautioned him it was between us. Fortunately, it hasn't seemed to affect their relationship, even though she was understandably embarrassed. 3 weeks ago, my wife Jenny passed away after a 6 months battle with colon cancer. She left us with all of us by her bedside in the home we constructed 4 years ago for our retirement. Her retirement, only 18 months in when she was diagnosed, was abruptly cut short. Describing the loss is beyond my capacity. It surpasses any pain I've encountered, even the collective anguish experienced in this community as betrayed loved ones following our reconciliation. She dedicated her remaining years to making amends for the pain she caused, and remarkably, she succeeded. Her absence is deeply felt by me and our children. Nevertheless, I understand that I still have a purpose. In her final days, Jenny penned a letter to me, entrusting our pastor to deliver it after the ceremony. Just 3 days ago, I read the letter and would like to share a passage from it. For those who have found something positive in our story, It emphasizes the importance of forgiveness for those betrayed. It also underscores that those who betray and genuinely feel remorse should face long-term consequences for their actions. Here is the excerpt. I am currently enduring a significant amount of physical pain, as you know. However, my faith provides me with a perspective on what lies ahead. The pain will eventually subside. Some pains tend to turn one inward, and I have been reflective in recent weeks. At times, I feel I deserve this pain for what I did to you, to us many years ago. Nevertheless, you consistently lift me up, settle me in my chair, help with meals, bathe me, hold my hand, and play your guitar as I delve into memories. I recognize that this pain is a gift. It allows me to experience the true essence of love in its purest form. Your genuine forgiveness for my past actions, your care for me, reflect true love and forgiveness. I love you immensely. There is more I want to say, but I felt compelled to share this with our community and express gratitude for your presence in our lives, even if it's on the periphery. I love you deeply.